Well, hey there everyone. My name is Daniel and I'm the online campus pastor here at OAG. I am excited for today's podcast because this is from our series entitled Before You Knew Me. This will be stories and testimonies shared from folks just like you and our own church family. So sit back and relax and be inspired by what God has done and is still doing in the lives of His children.
All right, now that the technical things are out of the way, we'll start. So Pastor approached me, I don't know, about a month ago or a little bit over a month ago and asked if we would be willing to share kind of our story, our journey through life and what brought us to the Lord. And I told him, I said, let me check with my wife. And I said, and as long as she's okay, I'm okay with that. So I pray that Lord will allow somebody to get something out of this. So we're going to try this. We actually never shared this together, so bear with us as we work through some of that. But kind of to frame who we are as people and where the Lord has brought us from. When I was born, obviously, I was actually born in Norfolk, Virginia. I grew up in that area. When I was probably about, 5 or 6, we moved from Norfolk, Virginia to Virginia Beach. My biological father lived with us till I was about 5 or maybe 6 years old, and then my mom divorced him. He was not a very kind man, and I did not learn until about 6 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago at the most. I always thought that he had married my mom, and that was kind of it, until they got divorced, and he later got remarried. For a period of time after they got divorced, I would spend typically one weekend a month with him. And again, he wasn't the best. He was an alcoholic. He was used drugs. Ironically, I found out about 6 or 7 years ago that he served in the Army. He was actually in 82nd Airborne for a little while before he got out and pursued other things in the civilian sector. One of the most painful memories, I guess, is my parents' bedroom, pale blue wall, and for as long as I could remember, there was a hole in the wall from when he had gotten so angry. It wasn't his fist; it was actually the doorknob was there, and he broke through the drywall. I was looking for the right word there. The other painful memory I have was as a kid, I had warts in a couple places. One of them happened to be on the back of my leg, right at the joint. So that would occasionally actually tear, if you will, I guess that's probably the right term, and open up. And I remember distinctly, I don't remember my mom being in the car with us at the time, but he was taking me to the doctor, and I'm literally on the floor in the back seat crying, because in Brian's mind, Brian's about to die. But he looked back at me and he said, "You are the biggest mistake that I ever made." And if I'm being honest, I carried that, and honestly, probably until we got here, did I really start to address that. I remember before my mom divorced him, One time he ended up in jail, and she went to go see him, and I was with her, and she left me in the car and told me to duck down in the front floorboard and stay there. Now, she didn't go there for hours, and I never asked her why she did that, as opposed to, I was fortunate. I grew up very close to her parents and was very involved. I'm the oldest of 4 grandchildren. So why she didn't make arrangements to, like, say, drop me off with my grandmother there. After she divorced him, we moved first to an apartment, then to a house. And one of the strangest memories, and I shared it with 1 or 2 people since we've been here, I had a dog that I pretty much had my entire childhood until I was about 15, 16 years old when she died. But she got pregnant twice, and I don't know the whole animal side, but apparently there was something up with a few of the puppies in both litters, and either she sat on them or whatever, but they died. So as a little kid, my mom tried, but yeah, son, I need you to go into the doghouse and get the dead puppies because I can't deal with that. So, yeah, there's a few things there. When I first started going to school, I went for the first couple of years to a private school. We weren't poor. I would not say that we were wealthy. And probably the biggest thing that stood out to me in that time was they didn't know where to put me when it came to reading. So they had me meet with with a teacher or some kind of specialist. I don't know if it was technically a specialist at the time. And they would give me these little books that had different stories, and then I would read them and come back and we'd discuss them and things like that. And the most profound thing that happened as they were trying to figure this out is one of the little book of stories that they gave me, I took it home, and it's probably the only time I started that and literally stayed up until I finished it and went back and let them know. She didn't believe me, which really angered me, actually. And the impact that had is from that point on until actually high school, and it was only one book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. That was the only time until after we actually got married that I ever finished a book moving forward. So just kind of the impact that those in schools can have. We moved to North Carolina, northeastern North Carolina, for 4 years. We lived in a little community that was back and actually had water, a canal system right in our backyard, so I could literally fish from our backyard. Although to me at the time, fishing, unless I was catching something, it was boring. So I swam with, as my dad would call it, Jake the Snake. And thankfully, actually in the 4 years, we only had one incident where a snake showed up while we were swimming. So in North Carolina, I joined FFA and was active there. And had we not moved back to Virginia 4 years later, I probably would not be here because I would have worked somewhere where there was forestry or agriculture, because I really enjoyed that. So after my sophomore year of high school, we moved back to Virginia because my dad was driving 75 miles one way every day to work while we lived there. And bless his heart that he actually did that. And when I say dad there, the part I left out is my mom eventually remarried. And that's why I have the last name that I have today. He actually adopted me. In Virginia, The school that I attended did not have FFA, and so I was kind of disappointed there. But they did have junior ROTC program, and at that point, I knew that I was probably going to go in the service. I knew I couldn't stay home after I graduated, nor did I want to, and that it was probably a good opportunity and probably smart on my behalf if I at least did that. I didn't know at the time, but I found out that by taking 3 years worth of classes, that I actually could go in advanced and rank, which that was nice. So I actually outranked our armor when I was in basic training, which was kind of interesting. He was a private and I was a private first class. So at the end of my junior year, with my parents signing off because I was only 17 or 16 at the time, I think, I actually went to, dealt with a recruiter, went to MEPS and enlisted in the Army under the delayed entry program. So when I started my senior year in high school, I knew as long as Brian could graduate, I knew what I was going to be doing for the next several years. And to this day, if you ask me, I would swear that my English teacher gave me a pass, because English was not, and I still struggle today with English and writing. Yeah, so that's actually what got me there. So I'm going to stop and let Glenda kind of share her side. So.
Oh. All right. One thing I wanted to say, some of the things I'm hearing from Brian is the first time for me, because when me and Brian met, we met in church and everything. We really didn't know each other. You know, we went to church together. We didn't really share, like, I don't even know if I even know where he grew up and all that. So some of these things are new to me, and I don't know if mine will be new to him or not, because, I talk more. But so I was born in Willoughby, Ohio. My father's name was Robert McLean. My mom was Clara. I had two brothers. My oldest brother was David. He's 5 years older, or he was 5 years older than me. And I have a brother named Danny. He's 4 years older. My mom was 16 years old when she married my dad, so she had to have her parents' permission. On my dad's side, I'm Scottish, and on my mom's side, I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. That's kind of, well, of course now you can't tell, but I had kind of reddish hair when I was growing up. And my brother had bright red hair and the temper to go with it. The boys are dominant on my dad's side, so I'm told my great-grandmother Ruth was so excited when I was born. And then my mother, she didn't drive. When I thought about, things through my head about my childhood, back in that time, my father didn't feel like, she needed to drive. It wasn't like he was trying to just keep her at home, but she was, a housewife, and he worked. And he went to work as a tool and die maker in Wickliffe, Ohio at General Electric. And he was a very smart man. As a kid, I, really didn't kind of pay a lot of attention to that. But growing up, I realized he was a very smart man. And we had this one incident. My father would give my mom grocery money, and he would tell her, when he would return to the store, he'd drop her off, and then he'd come and pick her back up. Well, not too long after I was born, Dad had dropped Mom at the grocery store, and and he kept me. And he was picking her back up, and Mom asked, "Where's the baby?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, I left her at home." So they rushed back home, and I was still asleep. And Mom said I was tiny, so I slept in a dresser drawer. My father, he would get up early in the morning and head to work, and it was about an hour commute, and he would return home around 5:30, 6 p.m. We'd eat dinner, He was never a big talker. I mean, by that time, he was exhausted, from his day, because he would be, welding things and, making all these tools and that. But during the week, he was tired. My father, he did not care for crowds. I really think he kind of had an issue with that. I think that's why he dropped Mom off at the store. He normally didn't go to the store. He loved Sears. And if he went to Sears, he went, he knew what he wanted, he got it, he got out of there. And my mom got mad because they were supposed to be going out for their anniversary, so she's thinking, oh, we're going to, go out to, well, he went to the drive-through at a restaurant, and that was considered their date, their date. So she was like, oh, I don't know about that. And then she wanted to go to a garden show, so he said he would go to the garden show with her. And they got a little ways into it, and he was like, no, we got to go. So he just had an issue, with crowds for whatever reason, I don't know. So we didn't go like a lot of places, like people do, go to the movies, go different stuff. We would go see his parents who lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And my mom's parents lived in Faulkner, New York. It was about, I don't know, it was about maybe 3-4 hours or something like that to get to my mom's. But we didn't go constantly to New York. But like we'd go for Christmas, we'd go to my dad's parents' house. And it was unique. I don't know why, but my grandfather, he cooked. He did the cooking, he did the shopping. I guess Grandma just didn't cook or learn how to cook, I don't know. And he wasn't a big talker, but he was known for, he knew how to pinch a penny. He really did. We have this story in the family about Grandpa went to the store and they had like a sale. He was getting, I don't know if it was like a bag of beans or cans of something like that, and he had his little store ad, and it was supposed to be, a few cents cheaper. He had a whole grocery cart full of food, and the guy was arguing. He's like, no, it's not that. He left the whole cart there and walked out of the store, and I was like, all righty then. And I remember one day. My father, he was coming home. He'd gotten a new car. It was, I don't know if it was like brand new, but it was nice. It was, I believe it was one of the older Mustangs. And the funny part is, in the back there were 2 seats. Well, there's 3 kids. So the middle part had kind of like this, little hump thing. Well, I had the pleasure of having to sit on that because I was the youngest, and it was not comfortable because I'd be falling asleep, and my brother would say, get off me, and another one, get off me. And I'm like, how do you just sit there real straight? So that was not real fun. But I do remember my father, one day he came home. He didn't just get it for me, but he brought me home a little dollhouse to play with, and he got some things for my brothers and my mom. We lived in a trailer park. It was a single wide trailer. It had 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. I think that's why today, Brian can tell you, I have a thing about bathrooms. When we moved into our place, and then Mom was living there too, I said, we've got to have at least 3 bathrooms. So we do. We have 3 bathrooms. And my father did not believe in going to church. He said he read the Bible. I guess he felt like he understood it, and he said churches were just to take your money. I was like, okay, I don't know about all that. Well, my mom she became a Jehovah's Witness. My dad really didn't care if she did that or not. He let her do that. And me and my brothers would have to go with her, and I did not like going. I was younger, so I really didn't understand what they were talking about, really didn't want to know what they were talking about, so I would be kind of bored. But I was always drawn to learning about God. As a kid, I was like, man, I wish I could go to church, I didn't have really a Bible to read. But when I was younger, I liked watching the little David and Goliath on TV. I tried to get my daughter to let the grandkids watch it, and they're like, it's boring. I was like, yeah, it's not like what the stuff is today, but I thought it was good. I don't believe my grandparents went to church. I don't know if they, were saved or not. But when I was 10 years old, my father, he had to have open heart surgery. Now, at this time, I guess they didn't have it where they would do it with the veins and take it out of your leg. They just weren't doing that. So they put this Teflon tube there, and I guess it was down in his heart, and his body rejected it. So they had to take it out, and they says, well, there's nothing else we can really do for you. So then my dad, he went up to Cleveland Clinic, and he asked them, he says, hey, is there something you can do for me? And so they said, well, we have this new procedure, but you'd have to sign the paperwork saying, they weren't responsible if something went wrong. And it was where you take the vein out of the person's leg and put it in their heart. So they did it. And they told him it might give him about 12 more years, but it gave him more than that. But after that happened, he tried to go back to work. He tried working a half day. He couldn't even do a half day, so then he, went on disability. Well, after that, my mom had got a license. My dad got her like a, little car to drive, and so she had a job. I think she worked at a nursing home, like in the kitchen or something. And one night, it's etched in my brain. She was running late coming home from work, and my dad was getting irritated. Of course, back then you didn't have cell phones, so you couldn't call the person, and she hadn't called. So she came walking in the door with a bag with some food in it, and my dad, he was mad, and he was like, where have you been? And she said, well, I had to stop at the store. And then she had got these TV dinners. He's like, it took you that long to get TV dinners? And so I don't know. I guess maybe I just didn't know it because I was little. She got upset, and she said, I can't take it no more. She walked in their room. She packed, I don't know if she packed every single thing, but she packed her stuff, and I ran after her, and I was crying. And I said, Mommy, please don't leave. Please don't leave. And she said, I can't take it no more. So she left. We didn't know where she went. And then I guess she had, met some friend when she started working or something like that. But then later on, they were getting divorced. And the good thing is the judge, because my brothers were older than me, and then he asked each of us who we wanted to be with. And it was a hard, who do you pick? Who do you pick between your parents? My brothers were mad at my mom for leaving. And I wasn't thrilled, but so, I had said, I wanted to stay with my dad because I was worried about him because of the surgery. So we ended up staying with Dad. She got her own place. She wanted to, pick us up to see her or whatever. My brothers didn't want to see her, and I ended up, eventually I would go see her. And then, so my middle brother, Danny, he was kind of Dad's favorite, but he wasn't mean to us or anything like that, but okay. And so I said, I think I want to move with Mom, because me and my brother would end up doing a lot of the chores and stuff, and then Danny get away with not having to do it, so we ended up moving back with my mom. But I'll let Brian take it now.
So one thing I forgot to mention that when Glenda said it, growing up, my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad, faithful church attenders, went Methodist as long as I can remember. We would occasionally go to church as a family for a period of time, and pretty sure most of those, if not all of them, until I started exploring that on my own as a teenager, were Methodist. There was no rhyme or reason, even today looking back, on when we did that, or when we would go and why we would stop going, and all, but that's kind of that. A critical point in my life was actually in my senior year of high school, shortly before graduation. As a teenager, one, I'm amazed that I'm here today. Some of the stupid things that I did in my life, but we got to a point where my mom and I pretty much didn't see eye to eye on anything, and I remember we had a argument, and we were at the top of the stairs in the townhouse that we lived in at the time after we'd moved back from North Carolina. And about this time she was telling me to get out, I was telling her I was leaving. I had nowhere to go. And the only thing I could think of is I grabbed a suitcase, and the last thing my mom said before I left the house is, "I'm calling your dad." And the last thing I said to her was, "By the time he gets here, I will be gone." So I grabbed a suitcase and a couple other things, and I packed it with some clothes and some other things that, in hindsight, if you're leaving home, probably not smart to take a whole bunch of encyclopedias and other things. Just FYI. I had a very dear friend that I was in junior ROTC with, and we are still friends today. In fact, he's the only person from high school that I have maintained a contact with over the years, and he actually lives in Orlando today. So the only thing that I could think of, because as Glenda said, back then you either talked face to face or you were on a corded phone. I don't even think cordless were around at the time. So here's Brian walking, probably was at least roughly 5 miles to go to his house to see if I could stay there. So his dad was in the Navy, and his dad was actually out on a cruise, so that they weren't in port, they were actually out, but his mom was there. And he said, "Come on in," and everything. So he introduces me. I think that was actually the first time I met his mom. Introduces me to her, and they were Christians. And she said, "You can stay here, and I don't have a problem with it, but I need to talk to my husband, before we can, commit to long term." And I was totally fine with that. And they understood that, this isn't a long-term thing. I've got a plan. I just need somewhere to stay so I can graduate. I kept touch, and as a matter of fact, we're still in touch today. But I will say that was probably the first true time of seeing a godly example demonstrated to me in a way that connected to me. I shipped off, I graduated on a Friday. On Monday, my parents actually took me back up to Richmond, Virginia to reprocess through MEPS, make sure I was still physically, well. And then Tuesday, they put me on a train to go to basic training. So I took basic training through there, and then entered actual service after all my training was completed. When I signed up, I would have signed a 20-year contract from the beginning. I knew I wanted to go to college at some point, but I knew one of two things would happen if I went straight out of high school. I was going to get kicked out, or I wasn't going to apply myself enough, and I was going to flunk out. So probably one of the smartest things that actually ended up ultimately leading to Glenda and I meeting together. So I went to Germany, my first duty assignment, rotated back to Fort Bragg. At Fort Bragg, I got to the period where it was, well, you either re-enlist or you thank you for your service and go home. And I re-enlisted. I actually re-enlisted to go back to Germany because I enjoyed Germany so much. And then I went on temporary duty to Germany for 2 months, and we had most of our weekends we had off, and we happened to go to a certain base there that had a signal unit, and I walked in there and I talked to the first sergeant, who's the senior company level enlisted person. I gave him my name, my social security number, and I said, I would really like to be assigned here. I said, I don't know what you can do about that. I said, but I would appreciate, if you can make the effort. I said, if it doesn't happen, I said, I understand. God has a sense of humor, because when I came down on orders, it was for that exact unit is where I got assigned. That base is the same base that Glenda, about almost a year later, would be assigned to. Our units were in the same battalion, and our company orderly rooms faced each other. They were on opposite sides of the street, so we shared a common street for formations and such, but that's how we got there. Lee's shared a few times a commonality that we have in the fact now we didn't know each other until he and Mitzi started coming here. But when I got saved was right before I went back over to Germany. I was saved. I went to a Baptist church. I attended a Sunday service. They were going into a revival. The youngest daughter of the family that I had stayed with, I was in Orlando, and she kept inviting me to the revival. It was Friday night, the last service, and I'd made excuses all week long. Yeah. So I ran out of excuses, and I happened to get back, and they're getting ready to leave for church. And I told her, I said, I'm coming. I knew how to get to the church on my own. I said, don't wait for me, which their parents weren't about to do that anyway. I said, but I promise you, I said, I will be there. So I jumped in the shower, got dressed, and went there. Got there, sat toward the back of the church. And when they made the invitation to accept Christ, I remember she was sitting next to me, and I tapped her leg to let her know I was going up. And I didn't run, but next thing I knew, I was at the front surrendering to the Lord. The pastor understood that I was military, and he actually made arrangements to where I could be water baptized before I went to Germany. So here I am, a new Christian. They're nervous because I'm getting redeployed, and calling back home from Germany is not a cheap thing to do. So obviously there. So when I got there, being on base, not knowing anything, being in a foreign country, I started attending the local chapel there. And one of the things early on that really is a memorable moment was I was attending that, and I remember walking out one day, and the Lord spoke to me, and I'm kind of like Lee, I don't use that term lightly, but I literally turned around because I literally thought somebody else was talking to me, and he said, do not return here. And I'm like, what? Okay. So I did. So God placed a more seasoned Christian in my platoon. So I went to him and I talked to him. I said, look, I kind of have a problem. I said, I've been going here. I said, God told me not to go there. He said, well, do you want to go to church with me and my wife? They went to another base was in there. They had a bigger chapel. I said, absolutely. I said, because I got to go to church. So I did. By this time, Glenda is in Germany. She's going to church somewhere else. We get invited by another brother to go to the church that she's going to. And so we go, and it's awesome. That was the first Pentecostal service I'd ever been in my life, but I loved it. I loved it. I loved the worship. Church of God in Christ is predominantly African American, so we kind of stood out. We'll just put it that way. But we were warmly received, and it really was the foundation of my faith was through attendance there, and we actually met there. You want me to tell the story? Okay. All right. So they had a thing to make sure that we didn't have what today you hear the term players or brothers floating the field with single sisters, if you will. So if a brother was interested in a sister in the church, you had to have a conversation with the pastor. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of telling a little bit of age because I'm guessing it's probably not that way today, but that's okay. So I did. And I mean, we had gone, because she had our older girls, she was in government quarters, and from time to time, either she would open up her home in between Sunday's morning service and Sunday evening, YPWW, Brother Lee, which I know that rings, we had that on Sunday evening, so you kind of had a break. So you were pretty much Sunday except for breakfast if you ate that, and dinner, you were in church. And if you didn't, the mentality then was you must have backslidden. So I don't know that technically we called it dating at the time, but we got to a point where apparently I made her uncomfortable because I kept asking her out. And she let me know she liked me, but she didn't look to me that way. And so there was a break, and there was no hard feelings there. In between that, I actually got engaged. I was engaged to somebody that I was in Germany. She was in the States, and I actually had come back to the States to help plan our wedding, and things took a turn for the worse in that relationship. And people told me, they said, just rent a car, drive out to Texas, which is where she was working, and just don't worry about a fancy wedding. You can do that later. And I was like, no. And I kind of shut down. And then within a few weeks of getting back to Germany, I got a Dear John letter. Yay. And if that wasn't bad enough, she soon found out that the person that she married had a cocaine problem. So I went through a very hard time there because I knew that Brian was not supposed to be single the rest of his life. And I was I was almost 24 at the time. So I'm at the altar almost every time the church door is open, dealing with that, asking God for direction. Slinging snot is a term that was used back then. I mean, literally, I probably had my own individual Kleenex box. And I remember being in my barracks room and praying, and God showed me Glenda. And he said, trust me. I'm a slow learner at times. We've been here long enough. Some of y'all can attest to that more than others. So I butt-lorded a few times, and after the third time of him saying, just trust me, I was like, I better just trust God and leave this alone. So we went, so I asked her out on a date, and with two girls, understanding most times activities were going to involve both of us, or both of them, as well as her. But we did go on one particular one, and I remember what really showed that was God's plan was when we went on the date. It was just the two of us. We went to go to the movies. There was nothing in the local community that we wanted to see, but somehow we found out there was something that we both agreed on in Heidelberg, which at that time was about an hour away. So I called our pastor and I said, I'm using the church van, and I said, we're there. And he said, all right. He said, thank you for letting me know. So we're driving, and we no sooner get on the Autobahn, and she opens up and says, look, I need to share some things with you. And apparently God had worked on her heart. And I really, within about 5 kilometers, and I don't dance, I'm not that coordinated. I wanted to pull over and dance because everything that she said was showing me that it was God's plan. I didn't have a copy of my birth certificate. In Germany at the time, you had to, if you were getting married in Germany, even though you were soldiers, you had to get married on the German economy. Another God move was I had to request this through regular snail mail, and that thing came from the time I sent that, the letter requesting it with the money order, to when it came back was less than 10 days, which at that time was, unheard of. So amen to wow. So we had most of our congregation at the church were active duty military. We had a few that were Germans, and some were spouses, but most of them. We originally planned to get married in the church, but we ended up obviously getting married on the German economy first. Our first set of rings was literally bought from, I was thinking about it. I don't remember if it was a magazine. I honestly want to say it was a comic book. Yeah, thank you. So those ads, yay. We paid less than $300 for our first set. We did not have them when we got married. We had a brother and sister that were nice enough to lend us theirs for the ceremony, but they made clear they wanted them back. And we were so broke as a new couple that had a couple not given us, what was it, 50 marks? 50 marks. We couldn't have even gone to dinner. We would have gone home and figured something out. But we did, and we went to our favorite Greek restaurant there in Germany, and we need to hurry up. But God has had His finger, or His hands, not His finger, in our lives as I look back, and I've looked back even more over the time that we've been here, and probably even more so since COVID, and just seeing how God works everything out if you just let Him. Later on, she's getting out of the service because we both actually almost got deployed simultaneously with 2 young girls during that little thing called the Gulf War. And she felt that, that really rubbed her the wrong way. And she said, I want to get out. And we had to wait till they lifted the stop lofts. And I said, okay. So she's trying to getting ready to process out of the service. Meanwhile, I get notification, hey, you're going to Turkey and possibly into Iraq. So she's trying to out-process in Germany and at the same time get me ready to go. We don't spend an anniversary actually together until our third anniversary. We missed our second by 10 days. We have missed more than our share of birthdays and other things over the years due to my time in the service. Another God thing was I got promoted within 5 years to sergeant. At 15 years, I was still a sergeant. And I was approaching what is known as the retention control point. In other words, you haven't gotten promoted, you must be doing something wrong, and thank you for your service. I'm literally interviewing with other companies. I interviewed with one. The gentleman that interviewed me had retired from the Air Force, and one of his questions was, why are you looking at separate? And I explained, and he got it. He said, well, let me ask you this. He said, what happens if I had one month left, or one cutoff score when they published it, and if I didn't have the points, I was going to have to separate. He said, what happens if you make that? I said, I'm going to stay in. He said, smart choice. Well, again, God had a plan. I did. I got promoted. And I immediately came down on orders for Korea. Yes, Korea. Unaccompanied. Thank you. So we did that. But God has really, truly blessed us throughout our life together. When we moved here, obviously we went to different churches trying to find a church home. I will tell you that as soon as we came here, the very first service, I really felt like this was home. And I'm just so thankful. I've talked a whole lot. She's not used to me talking this much. So we have that in common too, Lee. Any last words before Pastor wraps up?
Yeah, when we got here and we were trying to figure out what church, well, it was a little easier to narrow down because we're Pentecostal. And I remember he was pointing to Oxford Assembly of God, and I said, oh, I don't know. So he says, well, why don't we just try it and see? So we came, and the first greeter we had was Jane. And, that was a win right there with Jane. So, but, yeah, I was thinking when I was trying to figure out stuff to say, I said, I don't know, we might need a mini series for this. But he did a good job with it because he remembers stuff a lot better than me. I call him my elephant because he can remember. He remembers.
Pastor, is that a compliment?
I think that's a compliment.
On behalf of our pastor and staff here at OAG, we want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of our ministry. We are grateful for you and the support you give our church and its ministries so that we can continue to do what God has called us to do, to be the family church for the family of God. For more content from Pastor Strickland and Oxford Assembly of God, check out our media website at oag.church/media.